Ladies and gentlemen, please help me give a warm welcome to Mr. Larken Rose. Get over there. However you can get over there. That works. Larken Rose. Ladies and gentlemen, Larken Rose is 3 feet from me. Pretty awesome. It was a nice intro song. Who was that?
That was actually the band Temple 8, the band of the guy who happens to be my webmaster, Kurt Tischer. And if you go to temple8.net, their music rules.
Awesome. Temple8.net. Number 8?
Number 8, yep.
Okay. All right.
Very good.
Jot that down. All right. So I don't know if you noticed. Turn around for a second. Okay. That's the Truth, Freedom, Prosperity logo. Does that look familiar?
Vaguely, yes.
Vaguely? Okay. We kind of jacked your logo.
Yeah, yeah. You asked me nicely.
I did. You're okay with that?
Yep, yep.
All right. No lawsuits, right?
It is an improvement, which I'm sort of sad about, because it's way better than mine. But
we have Keith Smith to thank for that. Let's take a look at the Iron Web logo.
There it is.
Yo!
See, theirs is better. Theirs is
Okay.
snazzier.
Now, the Iron Web, that's a novel that you wrote, correctly?
Yep.
All right.
I have copies hiding in the back of the room.
For sale. Okay.
And I wrote it while being a political prisoner, which made it extra fun.
I'm sure it has. So one of the things that I wanted to start with was the Iron Web. What does that represent? Because truthfully, I think that'll give people a better understanding of kind of where you're coming from, like philosophically. So if you can explain what this symbol means.
Yeah, if you look at the symbol, you'll notice there's 9 dots. It's just a 3x3 grid. It's turned 45 degrees just because it looks cooler that way. But basically all it is you take 9 dots, you draw a line from every dot to every other dot. And it's not just random or arbitrary. What that represents is basically a society of equals. You know, in this case, it's a society of 9 whole people. But as soon as you make it bigger than that, the pattern gets too bizarre to even comprehend. The idea is that it's a society of equals. It's not a hierarchy. It's not a pyramid. There aren't masters and slaves. There are equals with relationships between each other going in every direction. And the beauty of a society, you know, preferably not 9 people, but, you know, maybe a few billion, that views themselves as equals and interacts that way, they are basically impossible to oppress. They are impossible to control. There isn't a master to grab hold of. Even if you take 1 dot and yank it out and kill it and it's gone, the rest of the network is perfectly fine. And the rest of us can get along perfectly fine. And so many attempts by humanity to make a centralized system to make humanity work, the centralized system instantly gets co-opted and hijacked by control freaks. This thing doesn't have a central system to get co-opted. It's a society of equals. There are no masters, there are no slaves. Each of us owns ourselves. So that's sort of the long-winded explanation of what the symbol means.
No, I think it's good. I think it was rather short-winded. I was hoping
compared to what I usually do, yeah.
I was hoping you would go a little longer. Well, I think that's important too, because I think something like that, for me, it's a better explanation to explain kind of where we're coming from rather than just giving somebody a label. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times it seems like labels, like when you tell somebody you're X, they put their own definition on it. You know, for instance, if you tell somebody you're an anarchist versus its actual true definition, it seems like they'll put their definition like, oh, you're an anarchist. That means you dress in all black, you wear black masks, you throw
run around throwing rocks at windows.
Rocks at windows, Molotov cocktails. Like so I think since people tend to impose their definitions, that's why I wanted to open up with that conversation, that question, because I think that people tend to listen more when you speak from a definition. So I guess for me, the question becomes is, while it's important to tell people where you stand philosophically, do you think that it's more important to talk to somebody from like a label and cling to a label, or do you think it's more important to speak from a definition? Well,
we're sort of stuck using the words we have, and unfortunately, most people don't even know what they mean by the words they use. They say law, and they say government, and they say authority, and they haven't even thought about those. And then they hear anarchy, and they think chaos or something like that. And so a lot of the challenge is getting people to back up and think about what they're actually saying and what other people are saying to them. I know a lot of people who believe in self-ownership and a voluntary society. Incidentally, voluntarism is the nice name for it, except nobody knows what it means, so you have to explain it anyway. The reason I still bother to use the term anarchist is because even though it has all these negative connotations because people don't know what it means. They think it means do whatever you want, there's no right and wrong, it's a total free-for-all, if you want to kill people, go right ahead. And it's the exact opposite of that. I mean, that's the precise opposite of what I advocate. But no matter how gently you try to introduce people to a change in their paradigm, there comes a point where almost everybody will get uncomfortable, and usually they'll say, like, you mean anarchy? No ruling class, no government, there's chaos. So I sort of start with the thing that makes them freak out and then explain to them why they don't really need to freak out. Just because I find I've met hardly anybody who's gotten from the standard statist view of society, which is we need masters in the ruling class. We don't call them that. We call our representatives and stuff. But we need this bunch of people telling us what to do and taking our money. To get from that to even beginning to imagine a world actually of equals, where there is nobody above us. We are beholden to our own consciences. We deal with each other as equals, as if we each own ourselves. It's a huge paradigm shift, and I know hardly anybody who's gone through that comfortably. To let go of what we've always had smashed into our heads is always uncomfortable, so I've sort of gotten to the point where I start by making people uncomfortable. And that's a lot of what my YouTube videos are about, is just taking what people assume and messing with it in their heads a little bit to make them uncomfortable with their assumptions. But I think, ultimately the ideas are what matter. And I know, thousands of people now who say, 10 years ago, if you said anarchist, what I thought the term meant back then has nothing to do with it. It's almost the exact opposite of what I understand it means now. So the ultimate goal is obviously to have people understand the ideas, and the labels sort of have to get dragged along or fixed, or we can either argue about them or try not to use them. But ultimately, people have to understand the underlying ideas. I totally sympathize with all the people who say, I don't use the term anarchist because people think of bomb-chucking imbeciles. But usually that occurs to people anyway, so I start with that and say, I don't advocate being a bomb-chucking imbecile. I do advocate that you not try to have the gang called government boss me around, and I won't have it boss you around. So either way, it's kind of a paradigm shock to people. Again, I don't really know a gentle way to get someone to completely change the way they see the world, so most of the time I don't bother being gentle.
Well, you don't.
No.
No, and I've seen you do it plenty of times. But one of the interesting things about you is, just to bring people up to speed, is that you haven't, this isn't just something that you just decided on within the past few years. I mean, you've been at this for a long time, correct? I mean, you've worked within the system, right? Haven't you worked on, different sides of the parties? And, so I've heard you say before, this sounds like a very cynical view, but it's taken you a long time to come to this. So what have you done in the past that's kind of brought you to this point where you're where you're at now?
Well, first of all, I gave up statism, I think it's 16 years ago. But years before that, I believed in politics, I believed in democracy, I believed in government, I believed, the Constitution, that's a great idea, let's do that. And the process of getting to where I am now consisted almost entirely of, I'd argue with people and I'd notice that there were inconsistencies inside my own argument and inside my own head. And I like to debate, and it's harder to debate and win if you're arguing with yourself and it doesn't match. Right. So with a lot of help from my wife Tessa, who's hiding back there somewhere, we would talk about things back and forth and sort of whittle away the inconsistencies inside our own heads. And we would sort of nudge each other until we both just fell off the end of the the political spectrum and realized there can't really be a legitimate government. I mean, basically we said, well, we don't want it to do this, and it doesn't have the right to do this, and we whittled it all away until what was left was, well, people can voluntarily organize and stuff, but there can't be a legitimate ruling class. But it took me years to come to that conclusion. Now, luckily, I know a lot of people recently who get there in, you know, a few days,
Yep.
which stuns me because it was literally years for me to dare to look at just some basic assumptions. I mean, a thing I often say is stating the truth about these things is painfully obvious. It's so simple. It's the lie that's ridiculously complicated and convoluted. I mean, literally, if you say, can you delegate a right to somebody else if you don't have the right? Everybody says no. There goes government.
Right.
Literally. The whole idea explodes if you can't give to Congress a right you don't have, because that means they don't have any rights we don't have. Power to tax, power to regulate, power to legislate. I can't do that, which means they can't. And just concepts like I own myself. It's hard to get a concept that's simpler than that. You know,
That's true.
Okay, I'm this thing, you're that thing. I'm in charge of this, you're in charge of that. Hopefully we can get along and cooperate and stuff. And compare that to the complexity of the lie of government of, well, it's us and it represents us and we elect it and we choose it and there are these two bodies and they choose to legislate this and then it goes to this other guy over here and he decides to vote for that. And they're really being us and they're really serving us when we elect them into a position where they boss us around and take our money. The lie is this huge, convoluted joke that I'm kind of ashamed it took me that many years to see how patently absurd the underlying assumptions are. And I'm thrilled to see how many people are doing it, 100 times faster than I did. And most of what I do is try to make the journey easier for other people that I went through, because I don't think it should have to take 5 years or whatever it was to recognize the bleeding obvious.
Well, in the events that I've introduced you before, and I said, do you have a bio? And you said, yeah. Here's what you say. Here comes Larken Rose, just some troublemaker. And it's been perfect because it's technically what you are. I mean, you've said before that what you like to do is go around corrupting minds, but I don't think that it's what he does.
In a good way.
In a good way, because what I think that you're doing is I think conventional wisdom kind of takes us along this goofy journey that someone's going to take care of us, when the bottom line is nobody's going to take care of us. I mean, a perfect example, we just saw it 14 days ago up in Staten Island, where Red Cross came out and gave people water. They gave them some things to drink. And, FEMA came out to tell people, we can't do anything for you until you talk to your insurance company. So it only took those people up in Staten Island, up in Oakwood Beach, maybe 2 days to realize we need to set up our own food stations. We need to set up our own, whatever. And they were taking care of themselves like there was no tomorrow. And it was beautiful to see that. Now, that's all clouded by all the other tragedy where are these people going to go in months from now? But in the short term, the fact that people were able to take care of themselves without having to ask anybody for permission, to me, is proof positive that the only person that's going to take care of you is you. And as a community, the only person that's going to take care of you is you, which is why you have, I mean, to me, these 9 dots represent not just 9 people, but maybe 9 entities or 9, ideas or whatever, but that's where the connection's at. So I think that it's interesting because I think most people live under this myth that we have certain rights in this country, that you have the right to, free speech or, right to whatever. Right to a fair trial, jury of our peers, but it's not really like that, is it?
No, it's not. And for those who don't know, I was a political prisoner for a year for not sending in a piece of paper to a bureaucrat. Wasn't tax evasion. The charge was misdemeanor willful failure to file. It wasn't that I didn't give them money. It's that I didn't send in a piece of paper swearing that I thought I owed them a bunch of money. Now, the reason I did that had to do with their laws, and it's an issue I hardly ever bother talking about anymore because it takes too much effort for people to look into it, and most people either they want to believe it for wishful thinking or they want to believe it can't possibly be true, and hardly anybody looks into it. But the things to learn from the whole story of this ridiculous thing of years of dealing with the IRS and then going through the court system and having a trial, that whole story is the ebook of that. The book's called Kicking the Dragon. The ebook of that is now finally out because the printed book was huge and it wasn't worth printing without charging $1 million. And the thing worth learning from it has nothing to do with the legal issue about the income tax. Literally thousands of people have told me that they either followed what was happening in my case, at the time, or they read the book later, and they said it was a real eye-opener to realize, because you see the nature of government in my little story, and there's thousands of other stories you could follow and also, see the exact same thing. And you learn that the mythology we're taught about due process and the rule of law and blah, 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 aside from whether the laws are bogus to begin with, it's all a lie. They rule you by brute force because they can, but they know that if they put it that way, people would rebel. So they say, well, there are laws, and you elect us, and we pass these laws, and if you disagree, we have due process, and you can have your meetings, you can have your day in court, and all these things happen. And from the beginning, what I said was, I'm going to do this openly and honestly. In fact, at one point, I ran full-page ads in newspapers that started, "Dear Federal Government, please prosecute me." And it laid out why. And I said from the beginning, I hope to be acquitted. In the end, 12 complete imbeciles said guilty, and I wasn't. But I said from the beginning, the real reason I'm doing this is watch. Everybody else, don't do what I'm doing. This is not a suggestion of what to do. This is a really bad idea, to get out in front of a dragon and kick it in the nose because it'll try to kill you. But so I wasn't doing it as, people say, well, you thought you were going to get a fair trial? No, I thought they were going to lie, cheat, and steal, and I'm going to publicize it when they do. And I did. And a lot of people who have read the book said, wow, it totally changed the way what we're taught in Civics 1, you very quickly learn that none of that matters. It's all a show they put on to hide the fact that they're the mafia. They want to rule people. They want to control you. They want to steal your money. They don't care about the law. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about justice. They don't care about morality. They care about their own power. And most of the time, the only people who all the way understand that are the people who happen to be targeted by the control freaks who call themselves government. And it's not just taxes. There's victims of the war on drugs and a million other bogus state aggression things. But yeah, that story, among many others, showing a lot of people that what we're taught about this very civilized, proper, law-based system, it's all bullshit. It's all utter bullshit. They are tyrants and control freaks and liars and crooks. And I'm glad I could help thousands of people see that, even if I had to sit in a cage for a year to.
Well, I appreciate you doing that, and sort of a whole lot of other people, I'm sure. Well, one of the interesting things about your case was, even if your argument was total bunk, was total nonsense, you didn't even get to present your side of the case. So, when I came with this question was, we live in this myth that we have the right to a fair trial. You didn't even, a lot of people think that when you go to court, you get to plead your case. You didn't even get to open your mouth, essentially. And I'm friends with people, some of them are sitting in this audience that actually sat in on your trial, that the most eye-opening thing was just that. So on behalf of the world, and just on behalf of me, thanks for taking that fall. It's, it's a sucky fall that I'm sure you had to take. But
yeah, it sort of sucked. I wrote a few books while I was inside, so gave me some time to write some books.
I'm sure going to jail more than sort of sucks. Just, it's my opinion.
Well, it was minimum security. It wasn't prison like in the scary movies. Mostly it was just boring and stupid.
It's like draw a line around
minimum
you.
Security, yeah. Literally, I wasn't inside walls. I could have walked away. But then they'd come get me.
But that's against
the
law.
Put me somewhere unpleasant. That's against the law. Right.
So in most of your work, Kicking the Dragon, the Iron Web, The Most Dangerous Superstition, How to Be a Successful Tyrant, which is a really funny book. It's not funny, but it is funny the way you did it anyway. You advocate self-ownership, personal nullification. Keeping what NAPO is doing in a couple weeks, organizing a civil disobedience thing where they're going to go out and they're going to smoke, they're going to smoke cannabis, out in the open. So talking about civil disobedience, especially with the ramifications, I mean, how crucial of a role do you see civil disobedience in this concept of kicking the dragon in the face?
Well, to me, the underlying thing is for people to understand that they own themselves. And lots of people, when they come to that realization, do completely different things about it. You know, some people will say, I want to go, you know, have a smoking, and that's great. I'm going to go disobey as a demonstration that I don't think I have to obey the arbitrary commands of a bunch of politicians sitting somewhere telling me what I can do with my own body. And that's outstanding. And some people say, I'm just going to lay low. I'm going to, you know, stay under the radar. I'm going to trade where I can without paying tribute to the control freaks, without following their commands and their edicts, and I'll do things quietly. And other people say, I'm going to get off the grid entirely so they don't even know I exist. And other people say, I'm going to totally get in their face. And I think all of them have a part, and I think all are perfectly fine. To me, what matters is that people give up the notion that they have an obligation to bow to these people. Now, one thing I say that sort of annoys a lot of the freedom movement is a lot of it seems to be targeted at going to the masters and begging them to change their commands. And a lot of petitions and campaigns are like, will you politicians please allow us to keep more of our money? And all the politicians hear is, well, good, they still think it's up to us how much money they get to keep, in which case we're all still slaves. But I like the change of mentality to say, we're going to do this, and we don't need your permission. Whether we're going to disobey right in front of you, or we're going to disobey secretly, or we're going to do it however, if people escape the notion that they need permission, they need the law changed. You have to follow the law until it's changed. No, you don't. You have to break the law when the law is immoral. And most of human history shows that human progress does not come from asking tyrants to please change their ways. It comes from people disobeying the tyrants.
I think that was the loudest applause that we had tonight, and it was totally unsolicited. All right, so we'll...
and we're underground, so the drone probably won't do much damage.
Won't even pick us up. It's awesome. Actually, I have a friend of mine that read your one story, your one post, Stop Saying Please.
Oh,
so if you can remember this, look up, go to larkenrose.com and you'll check all his work out, but there was one specifically that said, Stop Saying Please. And essentially it was the idea of, why in the world why would you sign a petition to ask somebody to stop hitting you in the face? And the result of him reading it was, I don't even know where he is. He's like totally off the radar. So everybody reacts to your work differently, obviously, but he's gone. I don't even know where he's at. He may have changed his name. He's gone completely. Out of here. Well done. The last question I have for you is, so you make these videos, you write these books. Why? Like, what's the point? Why do you think people should read your work?
Here's the thing. So many people assume that if you write about morality or politics or philosophy or whatever, that the goal is, I'm going to tell you, here are my values, here are my priorities, here's what I believe in, throw away what you believe in, doesn't matter, adopt what I believe in. That's not at all what I try to do, and it's not what makes what I write hopefully worthwhile. The vast majority of people, because they were taught a giant lie, they're good people. They want good things. What they want society to be is just fine. What they value is just fine. And often people will value different things differently. But the problem is that this giant lie leads lots and lots of, literally billions of good people to fuel evil because they don't understand how the game works. And to me, the most dangerous superstition, which is the most important thing I've ever written, and I've loved how many people have said I read it and my whole view of reality just completely turned upside down. The whole point is that there's this lie that makes lots and lots of good people fight on the side of evil, and they don't even notice, as I didn't for most of my life when I was a statist. I believed in government, I believed in the game called politics, and I never would have believed it if somebody came up to me and said, yeah, thanks for the good intentions, you want peace, you want freedom, but you're totally fighting for the wrong stinking side. And I would have said, no, I know it's right. I know it's true. I know what's going on, and I'm one of the good guys. Trouble is, I was one of the good guys. I just happened to be one of the completely delusional good guys who had been taught a gigantic lie. So what I tried to do is not, take people's values and throw them away and replace them with mine, but show them that what they actually value and what they actually want out of society, you cannot get there until you escape some of these giant lies that have been stuck into our heads, because the tyrants know they can't control us by brute force alone. And they know that most people want to get along. We don't want war. We want to cooperate. We want to organize. So they have to make up a giant lie to trick us into being at war with each other forever. And that lie is called democracy and politics and government. It is not what makes us civilized. Government is not a check against the imperfections of mankind. Government is a giant amplifier of the imperfections of mankind. Thank you.
I agree. Very cool. Anything else that you'd like to get off your chest? Say?
A lot, but
I'm sure it's a lot, but we only have a little bit of time left.
I'll make it short. It's a thing I often end interviews and radio shows with. It's so easy and so tempting to point to somebody else or some other organization and say that's the problem. I mean, one of the easiest things is to point at the federal government and say that's the problem, because in one way they obviously are. They're doing heinously evil things with the warmongering and all the police state garbage going along. And it's easy to say that the problem's out there, and ultimately the problem really isn't out there. The problem is between the ears of 7 billion people. And if that fixes, the problems out there just evaporate. And one thing that what I most want people to understand is the power of tyrants is always 100% illusion. It comes 100% from us not understanding reality. And as an example, imagine tomorrow if everybody woke up and had selective amnesia and nobody knew what the U.S. Congress was. Literally, the U.S. Congress would have zero power, not from being overthrown, not from being voted out, because people would just say, I don't know what that is, and I don't care, it has nothing to do with my life. That's the end. Then it's a few hundred crooks in D.C. screaming at each other about how they should rule the world. You just put a wall around them, call them a mental institution, and we're done.
Definitely.
But our perception has to change. We have to understand that those people are not our rightful rulers. They're not our representatives. They're not government. They're not authority. They're a bunch of lunatics who have duped us into feeling an obligation to bow to them. When we give up that feeling of obligation, we don't have to do anything else. You don't have to do anything to the government except don't pay any attention to it. Now, if one person does that, he gets stomped on. But when the day comes that 300 million people do it in this country, or 7 billion in the world, that's the end of tyranny. You don't have to overthrow it. You just ignore it.
Definitely. People have heard me say this before, but I especially when it comes to things that are not like educational types of books, I can't get through a fiction book. I can't. I read like the first chapter and I'm like, I'll get back to this in 6 years. I read The Iron Web, which is 300 some odd pages on a cruise ship from Miami to the Bahamas with plenty of distractions, believe me. And I spent half the time on the ship reading this book and finished it up on the plane ride home. And one of the reasons why this book meant so much to me and why I got the symbol tattooed on my arm is because I've had every conversation in this book. And I think that's where it's come from. There's a lot of debates that are in this book that take people from a certain type of mentality, whether it's a status mentality, whether it's defending government, and for the people that really believe in their heart that no, we actually do need some type of a system. It takes them from that, and it baby steps them through this one notion of we have to be taken care of and we need a daddy. To no, you really don't. And the crux of the book for me was I own me, you own you. That's something that I've instilled in my daughter for years, and now at 10 years old, it's there's the plus and the minus of raising a child that tells you that, no, I own me. You're not freaking telling me to go to bed right now. I'll do my fucking homework when I'm ready. Leave me alone. But look, the kid gets straight A's, and I have no complaints. But I think to me, that's one of the most important introductory books that you can give to somebody. So, look, the holidays are coming up. If you're looking for gifts, don't waste your time, with stupid gift cards and stuff like that. Go right to the back of the room, grab a bunch of copies of the Iron Web, and give them out for the holidays. People will definitely thank you once they're done reading it. And
I'll thank you for.
I'm sure Larken will thank you too. But really, obviously, it's less for him and it's more for them. So I've given this book out to countless people, and I've gotten the conversation after they finish. They're like, "Wow, holy shit! I can't believe that." Whatever. Like the thing that you come out with at the end of that book. That really, like I said, I own me, you own you, and you have no right to tell me what I can and can't do, so long as I'm not hurting anybody. And I think that's really crucial. So, Larken, man. Thank you so much for being here. This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Really
it's been fun.
Give it up for Larken Rhodes, folks.
Thanks very much.